And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Keith Thompson, author, independent journalist, talk radio host, former talk show host, and former U.S. Senate staff member. He is also a near-death experiencer who has come to the conclusion that there's a larger pattern connecting UFO phenomena with paranormal capacities, shamanic encounters, near-death experiences, death itself, and afterlife phenomena. Keith, thank you for joining me today and welcome.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm a big fan of your show, and I'm glad to be included. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Keith, if you don't mind, can we start with your NDE and move on from there?
I'd be glad to. And I can tell you I wasn't always glad to, because after the experience had happened and I came back and made the mistake of talking about it, I learned a lot from that. And the reason that was significant was because I'm old enough that I had my NDE before I knew about NDEs as an experience, not familiar with the stages. It was 4 years after Raymond Moody's famous book, Life After Life. I was in my mid-20s at the time, so I was not interested in near-death, anything near-death. I was interested in everything related to life in the way that you are in your 20s. I did not know anything about the stages. Oprah had not made it famous. I lived in California at the time and had gone to Hawaii, almost like Florida, with a group of friends. We were going to run the Honolulu Marathon. That's just a little bit of background. So we did run the Honolulu Marathon on a Saturday, I believe. And, you know, when you finish an event like that, you're feeling fairly epic. We went off to the beach the next day, the north shore of Oahu, called Sunset Beach, where there are signs, permanent signs made of metal that say things like, if in doubt, don't go out. The waves are really severe. But I was a body surfer, and I was filled with the sense of infinity and eternity that goes with having finished a marathon, just completed, crossing the finish line with my friends. So we said, let's go out and do some body surfing. Let's all be careful. Well, I wasn't really careful because I did not understand that the big waves coming from the far out toward the shore are not really the problem, the potential problem. The big wave, the waves that are really the risk are the rip currents that are pulling back out. I got caught very quickly in a pattern of riptides fighting the big waves, and I was pulled out. I tried to swim back in. I did not know to stay parallel to the shore, get out of the riptides. I went further out, getting crushed by larger and larger waves, and I had a sense of impending death. And there came a moment when I said, I'm going to die. And at that moment, I felt myself rising up, I thought, out of the water from the below and getting to air again, but it wasn't that kind of rising. I was rising out of my body. I had never had an out-of-body experience before. I didn't know, as another category I was not familiar with. I had not studied the work of Robert Monroe, his famous book, Journeys Out of the Body. I educated myself after all of this. I left my body through the back of my neck, through the back of my head, and looked down from a panoramic view that had a sense of peace, tranquility, and utter serenity. And I was confident that I had died. And the phrase came to me, oh, dead isn't dead. And it was, and by the way, just a little more background. I did not have a strong religious background. We went to church because it was good for good people to be seen going to church. That was pretty much our family's attitude. It was a kind of a social thing. Decent people did decent things. So I did not have a deep orientation to the afterlife, visions of heaven, and it was not even confirmed in my religion, Episcopal faith. So that particular sense, I said, dead isn't dead. I saw my friends on the shore. They were calling to the body, which I could see. I said, oh, that's who they think I am. I can't be that. This is not set up the way we think it is, this meaning reality. And the key moment for me was when I could hear my friend Mary Payne, very dear friend, and we became closer as a result of this experience, standing on the beach and speaking with the same volume in her voice that I'm speaking with you and your listeners right now. She said to our another friend of ours who'd gone to run the marathon, she said, "Why didn't he listen? I told him it was too dangerous. I told him to be careful. Why didn't he listen?" She was anguished and she was a little angry. And I communicated to her, if you will. I said, "It's fine. I'm fine. This is nothing. There's no problem." But she didn't hear me. So I realized, okay, I can hear them. But how could I hear that? I was 100 more yards in a fierce ocean where the waves were still very big. I can't say I drowned. I'm not here to say that I physically died, as in many near-death experiences. Some relationship to the body might exist. I'm very open to the evidence on this, and I don't have a strong argument. But here's the anomalous part. I heard her say that. And so after the experience is over, and I'll kind of summarize at this point, we could come back to what else transpired in terms of the visions and the. I mean, for example, I went through the tunnel, I did not know there was a tunnel, went through a black space with buzzing and humming and vibration. At another point, I said to myself, this might kill me, but it can't hurt me. And I had a sense of the difference between that. The body may die. The body may have already died. The body-mind complex called Keith. I was very aware of that. I said, oh, Keith, might be over for Keith. But I'm not over because I'm continuing to identify that I'm I. Who is the I? It's no longer limited to that body. That was one of the biggest realizations of all. So then after I survived, came back into my body, let's just put it simply, realized I was looking through these two eyes again, had come to a cove that was very calm. There were two dolphins that suddenly appeared, and I come to feel that they were guiding me back. It's almost too good to be true, but those are harbingers of these kinds of experiences. I've come to find out. Wasn't prepared to believe that going in. Though after I came back, I told, the first thing I asked to my friends, did you see all that? I was doing basic reality testing. Did you see all that? They said, all what? And I said, well, then no, you didn't see it. And my one friend said, Keith, we thought you'd pretty much given it up out there. And I thought, oh, good, we can talk. I said, I did. I died. I was dead. And I came back. I could tell, Jeff, from the way they were looking at me, this wasn't going to be a productive conversation. They looked at me like I was delirious. Somebody mentioned, Keith, you've had a trauma. The language of trauma was in the air in those days. And I'm glad that it is. Trauma is real, and recovery from trauma is important. And I'd had the mind-body unit, if you will, had a pretty severe impact. And there's a saying, a line from the poem by Goethe, tell a wise person or else keep silent, because the mass man will mock it right away. So I learned that when you have secret experiences or experiences that aren't widely believed, speak of them carefully. Speak of them with discretion. And so I learned, I came away with that with two strong senses. Number one, it was the most real experience I had ever had. And number two, it wouldn't be wise to talk about it widely, the way that many, near-death experiences, go on to write books and so forth and on the subject. And I respect them a great deal. That takes courage. In any case, here's the other key point. The next day, I told my friend Mary, after I'd survived, we'd gone back to the house we rented. I'd had a hot bath, I was eating, and I was beginning to feel a sense of normalcy again, but not in terms of my consciousness. I knew that I'd been something else, and that something else was who we all really are. And this is a more limited domain that we all agree is real. That was already in place for me. It was a mystical realization, I guess you could say. I came to find out later. I told my friend Mary, who was on the beach, saying, well, why didn't he listen? I said, Mary, could we take a walk? I want to talk with you about something. She said, sure. She was just a couple of years older than me. She was there with her boyfriend. We were all good friends together. I said, I heard what you said on the beach. She said, what do you mean? I said, yesterday. Why didn't he listen? I told him not to go out there. I told him it was too dangerous. Jeff, I can't begin to describe the loss of color in her face. We were not well schooled in the literature of the paranormal. She didn't know about the near-death experience either. But we both knew that the knowledge that I was describing to her and imparting to her, it's very similar to people who go out of their body in the hospital, hear the doctor talking in another wing of the hospital. We're all familiar with those. So I came back without knowing about any of that. So we had conversations over many years. And I came to, just to bring this to a real close, I finally got to know Dr. Ken Ring, who was interested in UFOs, which I had already been interested in as a ufologist or as a journalist. So I ended up tutoring him about the UFO phenomena. He tutored me about the near-death experience and reinforced the reality of it. So you're lucky to have a guide. Sometimes someone from a distance, like the books of Kenneth Ring or the books of Raymond Moody. I've never met Dr. Moody, but I did get to know Ken Ring. And so I began to process what I'd been through. And I studied all of the material that tries to debunk it. I'm a serious researcher. If I found that this could be explained by brain phenomena alone, an end of life pattern that makes you feel good, it releases DMT, so you go out with a peaceful state of mind. I understand all those arguments. Explain to me then how I heard my friend Mary on the beach. And it has not been my only paranormal experience or anomalous experience in my life. So I brought it into the book to bring it up to the present moment of why we're here today. I did not intend to bring it into the book because I had kept that. I said, my credibility as a UFO author is probably already, it's got to be demonstrated at every step. I don't think I should tell my own story. It doesn't relate. But I had already come to realize the patterns between the near-death experience and UFO encounters, which we can talk about, are real. And I also felt I had spent enough time with UFO contact witnesses, close encounter witnesses, and heard the same thing from them, that they told too many people, or they wish they hadn't told anybody, or in telling the people, they end up being disbelieved, mocked, ridiculed. Tell a wise person, or else keep silent, because you will be mocked night and day. So I thought, first of all, for my credibility as an author, I wanted to tell my own story. But I've come to realize, Jeff, that by bringing it into the book, I'm completing my own integrity process. I'm now out with this experience. I've been out for, with friends over the years, but I've never as a journalist written about it because I have subscribed to the idea that a first-person experience probably doesn't help your objectivity. Well, you can be objective about a first-person experience. It's not a class of experience that must be forbidden. Otherwise, we wouldn't have memoirs of mountain climbers. Are they going to write about mountain climbing but not describe that they went to the top of the mountain themselves? Who'd want to read a book like that? So anyway, I decided to tell my story, and I'm continuing to live into it and to the lessons that it has brought to me. So didn't expect it, but I have no regrets about having brought the story into the book.
Keith, you know what I find interesting is that now most near-death experiencers don't really have a problem sharing their story. They feel comfortable about it. But the ones that also have UFO stories on top of it are inhibited to share that part. Why is that?
I think it has to do with the fact that precisely that Raymond Moody did write his book. It was so well researched. It was so clinically solid. And he captured the stages so well, fairly universal. And then there have been further books that have come out and by researchers as well as experiencers in the near-death world. The UFO world is still very different. You've got first-person books like Communion by Whitley Strieber back in the 80s, a very strong first-person confession for which he is paid. He's often jokingly admits he's paid a big price from terms of his credibility as an author, a novelist, on other topics. But we're still this phenomenon is there are patterns, there are consistencies in UFO sightings, but it is still, the biggest issue, Jeff, is what I call the laughter curtain. The denial and the debunking, which debunking is not the same as skepticism. I'm a skeptic, meaning I question my own assumptions when I realize, okay, I've got an assumption there. Maybe I ought to question whether that's an accurate assumption. I do my best to be a skeptic, and I'm a skeptic toward what I hear. If someone says they had a UFO land in their yard, I'll say, well, did any of your neighbors see it? Just out of curiosity, do you have other witnesses? It's not to deny that they had it. The debunker says it didn't happen. It couldn't have happened. Not possible. So there's been a lot of that, a lot of fake skepticism. I call it toxic skepticism. That is, in fact, simply debunking. And but at the same time, we're in a place right now with the Pentagon some years ago having disclosed that there is a program studying the very phenomenon that they were ridiculing and debunking. It's a funny little thing. They haven't quite squared the circle on that yet. They even changed the term, as you know, from UFO to UAP. The acronym UFO got an acronym upgrade. UAP now refers to unidentified aerial phenomena, or now even more recently, unidentified anomalous phenomena, which includes that it could come from the water. Very often they do rise up out of water. Simply put, the phenomena associated with UFOs have such a trickster quality to it, in the mythological sense of the trickster figure, the coyote figures, the ravens, who are both saviors and tricksters. They're saviors and con men. There's a lot of about the UFO phenomenon that is incredible. As one researcher put it, I never said it was true. I never said it was possible. I only said it was true. You hang out with that idea. We don't know how these events are possible in terms of the full events, including the paranormal dimensions, but they appear to be true. They appear to be real. And what I say with the near-death experience, UFOs, and the paranormal in general, when we have a consistent body of evidence in any of these fields that are not showing up, and we have stuff from the territory that is not showing up on the maps of the territories, then at some point we begin to say, maybe it's the maps. There's a territory here that seems to be real. It's not yet on the maps. Has anybody checked the maps lately? Are they up to date? And a big part of my argument is our maps are not up to date. They're not up to date on the implications of the near-death experience, which is that consciousness, presence, the sense of being does not depend on the brain and the body. It is a permissive relationship, I would say. The brain permits consciousness, but when consciousness exists, when brain activity is flatlined, it tells us our maps aren't up to date. It appears that consciousness is not something that just emerges out of dead matter, which is how our materialist worldview represents it. It appears that consciousness proceeds. It's the ground of all being, out of which matter arises. So that's my attempt to say why the UFO phenomenon is still tricky to talk about.
Well, you are the perfect guest for my audience because not only have you had the NDE, but you wrote a book called The UFO Paradox. And in the book, you talk about the connection between the NDE, death experiences, shamanism, and other things with UFO contact. Can you tell us about your conclusions?
I can, and my conclusions are not rock solid yet. I'm observing the patterns. I didn't come at this, by the way. When I first came to the UFO subject as a sixth grade student, maybe I'll tell the story a little later, but my introduction to the subject was giving a classroom current events report in the sixth grade. And I chose a UFO sighting that was happening at the time. And so I presented it to my class. So I was a young journalist. I didn't really know it. So I did not at that time think, when I walked away from that classroom report, I thought, well, these are probably craft, probably some form of technology, and it's probably going to be explained fairly soon. That was quite a number of decades ago. I did not expect to be making these larger analyses, parallels between other kinds of phenomena. I had not yet, by the way, had my near-death experience when I was a sixth grade student. So my own experience with the anomalous, with the non-ordinary, has informed my continued thinking. Let's start with the connection between the UFO experience and the near-death experience. What they both have in common, they have some differences, but they both involve a sense of light. Very often the UFO appears as a light in the sky, a daylight disk sometimes when it's daylight. It appears to be a gray object, but during the night hours, it comes as light, and the light is extremely powerful. And in the light is what appears to be a craft morphing its shape. There appear to be beings, and then there are interactions between those beings who are not human beings. They appear to have bodies that are they're not exactly like ours at all. They're humanoid-like, bilateral symmetry, right and left arms and legs, but they're like elves, reptilians, so forth, dwarfs, gray. They're called the grays, and they have other names too. So some are short, some are long. They interact with the human, take them inside a contained area, and procedures go forth, are done. Now, with the near-death experience, likewise, there's moving into the light. There's an encounter with beings. I didn't touch on my own experience of realms that I would call celestial, angelic, with a sense of wisdom, a deep life review. More than a review, it was a reliving of my entire life in a way that it makes no sense logically, rationally, to see your entire life unfold in seconds and get the karmic messages. I didn't even know the word karma at the time. It's not uncommon. There's for UFO witnesses, let me shift about the life review process, not only in the near-death experience, but is somewhat common in the UFO encounter. A witness named Dennis Sant, S-A-N-T, in the Hudson Valley River, Hudson Valley sightings of the 1980s in New York State, saw a craft while he was driving his car. And during the 20 minutes that he drove and saw the craft, he went into an inexplicable life review that he later said there was no basis. There was no more basis for my having gone through a deep, penetrating life reliving, life review by seeing an anomalous light in the sky than if I had seen a train passing. But there was something about the connection between this external light and some interior understandings that I was getting. So there's that, the UFO and the near-death pattern. Now, what about shamans? Shamans, the shamanic literature pertains to the oldest practice of religion on this planet, what we would call religious life. The shaman is that figure in the tribal society who is often isolated, has an unusual set of proclivities often, might have had encounters all of their life, and is trained, goes into a specific kind of training to seek out encounters with beings in the lower, middle, and upper worlds. And the idea of shamanism is that this figure, the shaman, makes contact with these figures to gain knowledge for the tribe, to conduct healings, to find resources, locate lost objects. And the shaman is is not a member of the tribe in the usual sense. So again, here we have the shaman deliberately seeking out to become a mediator or a psychopomp. Psycho refers to the word psyche, mind. Pomp is a bearer or a guardian or somebody who makes the transition between two worlds. So with all three of these worlds, near-death, UFOs, and shamanism, there is a three-part initiatory process. I bring in the work of Joseph Campbell on the structures of rites of passage. We separate from a reality that is normal. If you have a UFO experience, it takes you out of your usual frame very fast. Dennis Sant, driving along Hudson Valley, sees a UFO, conducts a life experience, life review process on the spot for 20 minutes, gains knowledge that he doesn't understand, comes away with wisdom that makes no sense. He's no longer in Kansas anymore, Toto, right? He's in some kind of an in-between realm. That's the second stage, the margins, living betwixt and between. And there's a long period in all of these. Near-death people understand this. I went through it myself. Even though I had come to terms after being told, Keith, you didn't die, that doesn't happen. So get over it, get therapy, you'll be normal again. I can't tell you the number of people who reassured me that I could be normal again. I've never valued normalcy anyway, in the way that they often think. I mean, I like being functional, but actually normal is sometimes a small place to live, if you know what I mean. So then there's the third stage, and I think we can define that as a return. There is from separation, a long period of living in the margins, in the boundaryless area, betwixt and between, neither there nor here, and then you come back. And Campbell, Joseph Campbell, in his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, described the importance of the return, that the journey into the extraordinary realms, where maybe new knowledge has been gained, is not considered complete until the traveler comes back with what he called a boon, B-O-O-N, a teaching, a reward, an insight for the tribe, for the people. And I think I must say, I came to realize that's how I came back from my near-death experience. I came back, my own sense with, I have something to share. I had a strong sense that the difference between this realm, where we are right now, with three dimensions of space and one of time, our four-dimensional world, is not ultimately separate from these other realms. They're all here. It's just that here is a bigger place than we know. I think heaven is here. The dead are here. And by the way, that's the last frame of reference, not just the near death, but the post-mortem world. The Buddhists in particular pay great attention to the stages of dying. As you know, you go through the Bardo realms, and the idea is to bring as much lucidity and clarity and presence of mind to not get caught up in the displays that you will go through. I went through displays. I went through the first stages of the Bardo, I believe. I saw a line. I felt a very strong sense of a line, that if I crossed that line, I would be with the, by the way, I was with dead, deceased relatives, friends, beings that did not seem to be ordinary. I wouldn't have called them UFO beings. I was with mythological figures, eagles, hawks, all manner of beings, which from the skeptic standpoint add to the incredulousness, right? Oh, well, with mythological, this is a mythological framework that we need. Mythology explains it in a dismissive sense. Well, what Joseph Campbell believes, yeah, mythology explains it, because mythology tells of realms that we've lost track of that are real. So the after-death stuff too is very relevant. I think that I've become more interested in all of the transitional, I won't go into great detail on this, but, and I don't in my book as well, so I'm not saying go read the book and you'll learn about it there. I sat with my mother when she died, and I felt presence. She was in a hospice. I was the one of my brothers that was most open to this already. I felt presences filling the room, a sense of heaviness, sort of a density, but not heaviness in terms of gloom. I heard whisperings, and I watched my mother, her face soften. She was in a coma, dying of cancer, and also heard what seemed to me to be music that I couldn't explain. It was super sensory music that was the most beautiful sounds that I'd ever heard. I knew I was in the presence of dying, and that my mother was making her transition. And I now believe that she was being taken off by her family and friends. The visitation phenomenon is very common, and it's really important. I would just say, from a practical standpoint, if you are sitting with someone, if you have someone you're about to lose, sit with them with great respect and understand that when they are in a coma, their hearing continues to remain intact. Don't hesitate to whisper to them, to be safe on their journey, that they're going to, there's no reason not to doubt being, and to continue to trust that there's no place that isn't safe. That was one of my experiences of being with my mother that was truly transformative for me.
Do you feel that the ETs are more likely coming from other planets or other dimensions?
That's truly $64,000 question. If they were coming from other planets, there's evidence that the behaviors and activities that they do with human witnesses, the medical examinations, were also done in previous centuries in folklore of the fairies. And by the way, to say to P, if anyone's listening seriously into the UFO stuff, they say, "Oh God, we don't have to do fairies too, do we?" I understand that if you're a UFO researcher, especially if you might be a professor in the physics department at a university, you're having a hard enough time explaining to your colleagues why you're taking the UFO phenomenon seriously. Then this guy comes along and says, well, there's fairies and elves and shamanism and near-death experiences. I'm sorry, that's just where the evidence seems to open to. In any case, if they are conducting medical examinations, it seems they've taken a very long amount of time to get the information they would need. As Jacques Vallée, the French researcher who's been at this for a very long time on the UFO phenomenon, has pointed out, if they're conducting if they're getting genetic samplings, they could knock off one good medical clinic some night and get all the genetic material they need. So what are they doing instead? It doesn't mean they don't seem to be conducting genetic experiments, or they don't, it's not that they aren't investigating us, but they want us to see them investigate. They're putting on some kind of display for us. So that may seem like a vague answer. I don't know at this point any basis for determining whether there's no experimental basis that I'm aware of or procedure to determine the criteria that would distinguish extraterrestrial from, let's say, parallel universes or interdimensional or even time travelers. But what they all have in common, all three models, is beings of another kind, of another nature, that appear to be partly corporeal, partly material. They appear to be able to move in and out of our material realm. They don't seem to be from this world. They come into this world, impact us, including physically, and then leave. That's a nightmare for materialist science. It evokes great scoffing, laughter, ridicule. But in any case, at this point, I don't know. I think the phenomena are real. The origins are yet to be determined. The current case that many people are watching is this former military intelligence agent named David Grush, who's come forward after a lot of research, a lot of investigation, saying that he's talked with people. He's provided the names, the locations, the dates, and the details of recovered spacecraft, which he, by the way, says could be interdimensional rather than extraterrestrial. That's remarkable, how that could be. How could a solid state craft be from another dimension and remain in this dimension as solid state? I don't know. I don't say that to just dismiss his comment, but that these objects and the pilots, what he calls the biologics of the situation, are being held now by the aerospace industries. They've been sort of offloaded on the McDonnell Douglas and Lockheed Martin and so forth. Well, I actually celebrate that claim because that's an empirical claim. He says he's provided the details to the Inspector General of the intelligence community. So I don't know if, I believe he's a sincere individual. I've listened to him. I've watched him on interviews. Try to use my Geiger counter test. What's my sense of the BS quality here? He may have been given information that isn't accurate, but he uses his military background, intelligence background, to say, I'm aware that I could be punked here. I'm aware that someone could be conducting an elaborate disinformation scam. I know how to account for that. I don't think that's what's happening here. So I go, okay, good. That's what I want to hear. Somebody who knows that disinformation is a possibility, who has attempted to identify if it could be happening. So I mentioned the Grush case, not because it's one I've gone deeply into, but that would be the proverbial smoking gun. It would be recovering the pistol if he can find the locations and get McDonnell Douglas to come forward and say, oh yeah, we've recovered spacecraft and it's ours, or whatever the status of it would be. It would be a very, very complicated situation.
Why do you think he was allowed to come out and make these claims?
It's interesting. He had the clearance to do it. He had the clearance to talk with everybody he says he talked with, and he does come very well credentialed. I give him, he has lots of award-winning achievements in his life. What he has disclosed has been approved. But let me put it this way. What he's disclosed to us was approved for clearance. He did not disclose to us, to the public in the interviews he's done, the dates, the names, the locations. He's provided that to the Inspector General under the whistleblower provisions, which provide a safe haven. Thank goodness for whistleblower protections in all branches of our government, because there's a lot of evidence our government is not the friend of open disclosure, and a lot of funding allows government programs that we have no knowledge of. So he has provided the information privately to be checked out. That hasn't been made public, and if he were to make the wrong kind of information public, he would be in serious trouble. As a matter of fact, one thing the skeptics of the David Grush case say, he was invited to go before Congress to testify on the specifics, and he declined. The reason he declined, according to Grush, is not everybody in Congress has the clearance to hear this stuff. And even in private session, if I were to reveal this, and if there were a member of Congress who doesn't have the clearance, he said, I am not going to sacrifice this. I'm not going to jeopardize this. So again, I find that all pretty much credibility enhancing in his case, that he's taken those kind of measures. But that's why he's not in trouble for revealing to the public anything that he shouldn't. Everything that is secret, he has kept secret at this point.
Well, since it was approved, what is the point of this? Like, what's the end game?
Okay, that is a good question. What is information management, especially on the UFO topic? Information management is the phenomenon where you hear a lot these days in the UFO world, the difference between controlled disclosure and catastrophic disclosure. And there is an argument that is made that the government bodies are very aware that, despite their long decades of denying it, that there's something going on that is real with this phenomenon. And so they have come to feel finally there are enough, maybe new generation, younger members of government who've come up, influenced by the values of transparency and openness and sort of a more universal view toward life, that we could live with this knowledge, we can handle the knowledge. So the emphasis, according to this perspective, is let's have a controlled disclosure rather than catastrophic disclosure. Catastrophic would be something like somebody taking a position like Daniel Ellsberg did with the Pentagon Papers, who I think was heroic because he paid the price. He was indicted, almost convicted. I think he might have been convicted, but his sentence was sent aside. In any case, there are people who are willing to put themselves on the barbed wire, so to speak, for the greater public good. So if somebody were to come forward, let's say if David Grush were to say, okay, I'm gonna disclose everything I've got, including violating my security oaths in doing, he would be arrested very quickly. But however, if he were to release information that were verifiable, then the concern is there would be a catastrophic disclosure. There would be a run on the bank. Society couldn't handle it. So I don't know, however, when the rubber meets the road, Jeff, what the difference between catastrophic and controlled is. I don't necessarily believe the government can have the ultimate control. I mean, for example, what would happen to our religious beliefs? What would happen to our societal sense of our place in the hierarchy of all being? I don't know. You could write, this is the stuff of great screenplays. And I'm sure there are probably great screenplays being written right now about. In fact, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised at all. There are probably some hotshot screenwriters in Hollywood right now shepherding projects, trying to get them to Steven Spielberg. And there's probably going to be a couple of good disclosure movies in the UFO world in the months or years to come.
I don't think we're going to ever be able to determine when the population is ready or not. It's just not possible. I think you just have to have the catastrophic disclosure and get on with it. I
think so. I mean, there's just no way to measure exactly how it would unfold. I think that's very similar, though, to the phenomena of the paranormal in general. If, as you probably know, paranormal research that is conducted in laboratories by, for example, by Dean Radin of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. I'd like to cite him because he is an absolute yeoman researcher, done excellent research on telepathy, clairvoyance, consciousness, and its impact on physical systems, which is considered psychokinesis. The controls on these studies are excellent. They're double blind, triple blind, quadruple blind. They have a standard of methodological excellence that far surpasses most scientific research. But the so-called scientific community that is wedded to the materialist worldview, not all science has to be materialist. Materialism is a philosophy of science. The scientific method per se is not materialist, doesn't have to be. So in any case, the threat that psychic phenomena poses, there have been a couple of researchers who have acknowledged, mainstream physicalist or materialist scientists who say, I've studied Dean Radin's stuff. It's good. He's made the case closed. Well, why don't you publicize that? Why don't you jump on board? He says, well, because there's one thing that stops me. We don't know the mechanism. We can't explain how it happens. That it happens is getting increasingly clear. That being paranormal phenomena in everyday life. That it's real, the fact that it's real is increasingly beyond dispute. How it happens, we can't say. Well, it happens because matter is derivative of consciousness in a way that we don't fully understand, and that actually accords with what some of the deepest religious and spiritual teachings of the wisdom traditions, Buddhist, Hindu, including some Christian. What happened with Jesus at the resurrection? I can't go down that road because I'm not a scholar, but something extraordinary took place that day. Was it did he physically survive? Was he physically resurrected? Or was there a display of paranormal? Did he appear in his spirit body, which is equally remarkable? He was seen to witnesses. Again, I don't want to go down the road of the resurrection, but it's, again, another analogy. Our accounts with reality are far from settled. There are things in this world that our philosophies have not yet dreamt of. Remember from the Shakespeare play. So I take great sense of enthusiasm from it, as you probably can tell. I don't have to have all the answers. I look to keep trying to ask better questions that get us further toward living the fullness of life that I think we're intended to live. I think we're called to live a larger life, and that this long period of materialist closure on reality, we're allowed to talk about these things. We can be empirical toward reality, but not too empirical. We can't deal with paranormal, can't deal with UFOs. We can't deal with people dying on the operating table and hearing a conversation a mile away. That shakes up too much. Well, what shakes up too much? Our beliefs? Well, we've all changed our beliefs about something. So in any case, I'm an enthusiast of telling the full story.
Can you talk about how the UFO phenomenon represents a transition for humanity to a cosmic identity?
Yeah, I think I use the Joseph Campbell model. By the way, let's just take the rites of passage model. I describe it in cosmic terms. The UFO witness goes through a rite of passage. They separate from their primary reality. They go through a long period of living in the wilderness. Then they come to some clarity and bring back truth. But just think of the number of areas in normal life that these rites of passage, everyday life, all of us are involved in some rite of passage. A person who's been single for their 20s, a young person, and suddenly finally meets somebody, and so it's a young man, meets a young woman, he becomes engaged. Okay, he's still single, but he's separated from the single life. Engagement means I'm engaged to be married. So he's in the middle realm, living new norms. Instead of hanging out every night with the guys, going to be spending more time with that one girl. He should be, if he wants it to be a good relationship. And then they get married, and then that's culminated. There's a return to ordinary life with a new identity. This couple is married, and now they're having a child. And we see rites of passage in our work life, seeking a bonus or promotion or raise. We're constantly going through rites of passage. So in this larger sense, I adopt Campbell's thinking about the three stages to say, I think there is a sense in which the individuation process by which we become more of who we are, I think there is a sense in which, whether it's extraterrestrial or metaphysical, we are in some kind of engagement with a larger sense of being that is making itself known. So what the parameters of that transition will be are far from certain. I think there's going to be a lot of belief systems about the aliens, who they are. That's already the case, Jeff. I'm constantly struck by people who contact me with a sense of certainty. And I say the word, I say that with a little irony. Very certain what's going on here. NHI, non-human intelligence. Here's what's going on, Keith. Here's what you don't see, Keith. Well, fine. I'm open to learning more, but I understand the desire of the mind to get closure. We want to be certain about what is going on. I think this phenomenon, I call it an agent of deconstruction. It's deconstructing our worldview. It's destructing our beliefs. It's asking us to live with a greater degree of tentativeness about things in our life, including things that we think we're certain about in everyday life. This whole idea of valuing knowing above all. Oh, I know what's going on. I know what the facts of the matter are. In the Buddhist and other meditation traditions, there's a great deal of emphasis on not knowing, don't know mind. This Buddhist teacher in San Francisco Zen Center, Suzuki Roshi, famously put it this way: in the beginner's mind are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. So I urge people to adopt beginner's mind with this phenomenon. Open to the UFO stuff, study the cases, notice when you don't believe, when that strikes you as very improbable, and allow that to be there. Just allow the not knowing. I find I don't learn anything new if my head is filled with certainty. It's only when I'm uncertain that I find I'm really open to learning new possibilities.
Are ETs benevolent or malevolent? And if they are, should we be scared?
So certainly, these abductions, the alien abductions, they appear to have tapered off. I don't know if that's entirely true. There may be somebody listening right now say, well, they haven't tapered off for me. They didn't taper off for my cousin Vinny. So I respect that. But the books that were written by Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs, a book called Missing Time by Bud Hopkins, and who's no longer alive, and Intruders. So the very title, Intruders. They are here. They're not friendly. They take people. These are kidnappings. People being pulled out of their beds, pulled out of their cars, and subject to examinations. These are a crime scene, essentially. That's how that view explained it. Now, John Mack, professor of psychiatry, the late John Mack of Harvard University, came at this, informed by the same sources. He began working with abductees. He began to find that, yes, that people were initially seemingly taken against their will or not with their approval, but that the experience was transformative. So, and that they also can carry messages. The aliens, so to speak, calling them aliens, or the others, the non-human intelligence, contains many different kinds of morphologies, body types, and so forth. But one of the common messages is we're messing things up here on this planet. There are warnings of ecological doom. And so that is considered one of the primary messages that is coming through. So to answer, are they benevolent or malevolent? It's partly, maybe they're malevolent. Have you ever gotten information from somebody, gotten feedback from a friend? You didn't take the feedback really well? Somebody said, Keith, you don't ever shut up. You don't listen very well. That can feel like a malevolent message to me. Until I realized, oh, gee, I do monopolize the conversation quite a bit. I'm doing it a lot here, but you've invited me to. In any case, sometimes we can think that a negative intent or a negative impact is a negative intent. So the negative impact of the alien encounters might be that they are shaking up things that I thought were settled. And I don't like that. But it could also be more than that. There might be some, it would be reasonable to think there might be species that are not friendly to the human endeavor. The spiritual traditions have talked about the importance of discrimination among spirits, discrimination towards spirits. Don't open to channeling whatever might want to come through you, because who knows what you will be opening yourself to. We know the warnings of many people about Ouija boards. Be careful, is what we're told. You might actually open to a real field of something that isn't what you want to play with. I'm not saying that with certainty, but I take with wisdom those kind of cautions.
You were surprised to get a phone call from New York philanthropist Lawrence Rockefeller asking you to lobby President Clinton to disclose the facts about the so-called Roswell incident. What was the outcome of that?
That was after I'd written my first book, no longer in print, called Angels and Aliens, in which I made these kind of connections between the UFO phenomenon and figures from mythology. And I didn't settle the subject, but it was considered it was a well-received book. And I received a phone call one day from an operator who said, "Mr. Thompson," and I said, "Yes. Could you make yourself available to speak with Lawrence Rockefeller?" I knew who Lawrence Rockefeller was. And I said, "Yes, when would that be? When would he like to do that?" I thought they were asking to set up an appointment. He's on the phone now. Okay. In any case, he had read my book, Angels and Aliens. He had become interested in the UFO phenomenon. He was the Rockefeller brother, including his brother Nelson Rockefeller, governor of New York, David Rockefeller of the World Bank, and so forth. Lawrence was the family philosopher. He went to Princeton to study values and purpose and meaning. He was also a pretty shrewd businessman who increased his net worth many times over by playing in the stock market. But he was interested in the UFO phenomenon, and he felt that there was a great amount of overregulation, or overclassification of information. He'd begun to work with others in the field who were advising him, and he said simply this. He said, "Keith, or Mr. Thompson," he called me, and I said, "Please call me Keith." And he said, "Well, then you'll please call me Lawrence." So we hit it off he was many years, he was in his early 80s or late 70s at the time. But he said, I have a ranch in Wyoming near Jackson Hole. I'm putting together a gathering there in September. I'd like you to consider coming. Come out a couple days early because I want to talk with you about these parts that concern consciousness. He knew from my writing that I was interested in this whole question of consciousness and what it says about the larger consciousness, the implications of consciousness in our scientific worldviews. So I said, I will. He said, "Can you make it?" I almost jokingly said, "I'll have to check my schedule." No, I didn't say that. I said, "Yeah, I'll come. I could come." So I gathered with other UFO researchers. John Mack was one of them. Other researchers whose names I won't mention because it's been quite a few number of years. I can't tell you there was a great. Oh, so here's what let's say I can't tell you what the content was because we agreed it would be off the record, but that's not because there was anything highly classified. What the upshot was, the result was how to proceed with trying to get more disclosure on the UFO phenomenon. Rockefeller took to heart the advice that it would be better to focus on one case rather than asking for some generic disclosure. Ask for one case. Let's focus on Roswell. So he made a formal inquiry to the Clinton administration. By the way, Bill and Hillary Clinton, set aside whatever one's views are about partisan issues, both have been interested in the UFO subject privately. They were open to the inquiry. And so the designated person in the Clinton administration worked with Rockefeller to launch an investigation in the military, in the intelligence realm, which came back with news that a complete exhaustive investigation had been done. There was no reason to believe that whatever crashed at Roswell was anything other than the weather balloon, as we have said. It was considered by some to be just another cover-up because, incidentally, at the same period, a great deal of messaging, not emails, although emails were used in the military before they were used in the civilian, but a great deal of documentation related to the Roswell case suddenly disappeared. Even normal communications at the Roswell Air Force Base. So here's what I came up. Rockefeller said, well, thank you for getting back to us. He did not succeed in getting the kind of disclosure he thought should come. He considered it one of many battles. There's no doubt. I don't deal with Roswell in the book because it has been dealt with so exhaustively. But I would say something crashed at Roswell that does not look like it was a meteorological balloon. Now, it could have been an extraterrestrial craft. That's the primary hypothesis among researchers. It could also have been something of ours that went awry. It's very clear that the military officials went door to door in Roswell, telling people, if you took any of the material, if you gathered any of the scraps from the field, release it to us now. They almost did a vacuuming. So something was highly classified, Jeff. I don't know what it is, and I think Roswell is a classic rabbit hole at this point. The more you try to go down, the more confusion comes. But I salute Lawrence Rockefeller in the book for his initiative in pursuing this, and I was honored to be part of it.
A significant number of my near-death experiencers, after their NDE, either start having alien contact or see UFOs. Do you think that's due to a change in their conscious awareness, or is it possible that something within a person's energy signature is changed and the UFOs can spot that human among the others?
I think it's probably both. I think that people say, Keith, you believe in synchronicities, these patterns. The phone rings. We've all had something like this. And I'm walking the phone. I said, I wonder whatever happened to Mary Ellen. I've been thinking about her. I haven't talked to Mary Ellen for 30 years. Just Mary Ellen comes to mind from high school. And I pick up the phone. She goes, hi, Keith. You won't believe it. It's me. It's Mary Ellen. I was thinking of you. What? So we have synchronicities in our lives. They're officially called coincidences, random, no meaning, no value, no purpose. And I say, well, synchronicities are real. And someone will say, well, why aren't there more? I'll say, how do we know how many there are? How do we know how many we miss because of the concentrated state of our self-awareness? We're so much in our bubbles much of the time in our own thinking process that it might correlate with, meditative states seem to be conducive to psi phenomena in the laboratory. Meditators tend to do better in getting the signal of experience across time and space. So the answer is there may be more that's already here that somebody who has a near-death experience starts to pay attention to. But I think it's also possible the energy signature does change. The sense of openness. They're part of a larger universe. They are early, there's a phrase, and then I think it's meteorological, distant early warning system. Near-death people, UFO contactees we may be amphibians in the same sense that at one point in evolution, creatures came out of the water and they succeeded in living on land. The gills became lungs, not automatically, but through trial and error and the process of adaptation and so forth in the evolutionary process. So other species have come from one medium to another. We, I think, are making the same transition. We are moving into other realms, to what Michael Murphy of Esalen Institute calls coming ashore to a larger Earth. That this Earth, this world here, is already larger than we know. So I think, there are parallels between people who find themselves after UFO experiences and near-death experiences. People often develop telepathic experiences. The woman whose name I can't remember right now, you may know her from Dallas, the city of Dallas, was struck by lightning. She and Jeffrey Kripal wrote a book together, Struck by Fate, Struck by the Light. She had a near-death experience from a lightning strike. She developed paranormal telepathic communications, which were not easy for her. It was not a bliss trip. So I think many near-death people will be the first to admit, and many UFO contact people, the entry into a larger world of possibilities is not always easy to navigate in terms of social relations, especially, as you know, there are many people whose religious beliefs forbid this kind of thinking. Oh, it's all demonic. Well, that's an idea. The demons, angels from another frame of reference. There may be beings that are not conducive, but the simply to dismiss the data. I'm more of an empiricist. I understand the cautions, but to simply declare it demonic and then keep our distance from it, I don't think is the kind of larger response that we're being asked to consider.
Do you think within our lifetime we will have complete open disclosure and the ETs will eventually land in Walmart parking lot and let us know that they're here?
Well, they probably would come to Walmart more than the White House lawn. You know, that your guess is as good as mine. I don't really think so. In fact, I think I'm of the mind myself. I'm interested in David Grush having put forward empirically testable claims that can be, at least in principle, adjudicated, found out. Does McDonnell Douglas have something at this location? Is it being held by these people? I'm more of the mind, though, that if I were a kind of a betting guy, putting money on the line, I would say that much of what the government is hiding is that we are outclassed by this phenomenon. Whatever it is, whether it's interdimensional or extraterrestrial, the maneuvers that are performed. You know, we know about the objects that are consistent with physical reality as we know it. They affect there's a heat effect. There is perturbance of the immediate environment. There are ground indentations, breaking of branches of trees. I'm talking about when UFOs are landing, ground indentation and burn marks. There are also phenomena that are far less easily classifiable as conventional physical objects. This is when a UFO suddenly breaks into multiple UFOs, or multiple UFOs or balls of light consolidate as one and then drop into the ground. Or a UFO appears the way you turn on a TV set. It doesn't appear from coming in from the sky. It shows up as an immediate point and then departs, like a turning off a TV set. This is a materialization and dematerialization process. And also the rapid speeds with which the tic-tac flights that the aircraft carriers observed in the early 2000s. These are phenomena that are not easily explicable in terms of our conventional physics. It may be that we need larger physics that can account not only for missing time, but Jeff, there's a common experience. The UFO encounter witness says the craft appeared to be about 10 feet in width on the outside, let's say 20 feet. When I was on the inside, it was many times larger. So there's not only a dilation of time, there's a dilation of space. This is called by some the Oz effect, OZ, as in the Wizard of Oz. So these are phenomena, these are characteristics that don't accord with our physical science. So that's why I tend to say, I think a lot of what the military is hiding is that they don't have the answers. And they can't very well come out and give a news conference that says we feel the need to disclose that we are in the midst of having encounters with craft that come in, apparent craft beyond our capacity to understand, that come and go with impunity into our airspace. We don't know what it is, but we'll keep you posted. I don't expect that kind of disclosure anytime soon. And because the government cannot say we don't know. So they do a lot of obfuscation and gradual release of information.
What is the main takeaway you want someone to get from reading your book, The UFO Paradox?
Well, I would say that the title alone, be open to paradox. The sense in which a phenomenon appears to have the objective qualities of matter, the subjective qualities of mind, and crosses the boundary between mind and matter in a way that paranormal behaviors do, knowing who's on the phone, not just an easy guess, You might be expecting to hear from your brother, but you weren't expecting to hear from Mary Ellen from 30 years ago. So the paradoxical quality, including the degree to which these phenomena are reported by witnesses who are credible. They've been told for decades, you didn't see that. It couldn't have been. That didn't happen. And so the paradox is the denial of commonly held experience gets sent underground. You may remember the scene from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the beginning scene where the air traffic controllers had 3 different airline pilots on the line at once, all 3 of whom had announced or had called in to say, Tower, do you see anything? Houston, do you see something to my immediate right at this angle? Blah blah blah. I've got something out here. No, we don't see that. Pilot, United Airlines 61. We don't see that. Do you want to report a UFO? The pilot pauses. He says, no, sir, negative. And he asked the TWA pilot, do you want to report? Same situation. I see something that I'm not supposed to see. Do you want to report an unidentified flying object? He goes, no. And the third pilot, Pan Am, do you want to report? Do you want to make a report? And he says, I wouldn't know what to report. No, sir, negative. Understood. Understood. So the very good, by the way, that was fictional, but it's very good example of what happens with you understand that if you do go public with a non-ordinary, in fact, this is okay. This, you asked what I would say, what I want people to take away. If anyone here has had some kind of non-ordinary, paranormal, anomalous experience, whether it involves UFOs, near death, psi phenomena, telepathy, etc., tell somebody in your life. Don't tell everybody in your life. Don't break it over the family Christmas meal, because you'll have too many people with too many philosophies and too many worldviews who are going to dismiss it and cause you a world of hurt, not intentionally necessarily. So, but don't keep it bottled up in yourself. Listen to shows like this, form a support group. Just tell one good person in your life who trusts that you're not a loon and who's willing to say, well, I trust that you had an experience, Keith. That this is what I learned very quickly on the shores of Hawaii, Oahu, that not to tell everybody. By the way, these were friends. These were friends of mine who later then came to realize when they discovered the near-death experience themselves, they said, Keith, we didn't believe you that day. I said, I know you didn't. And in a certain way, Jeff, when you don't go public and you keep it within, but you trust that your experience was real, because in my case, I did my best to debunk it. I read the debunkers' books about the near-death experience, and I realized there were too many parts of it that were not debunkable. So I didn't deny the experience. I just learned to keep it to myself. And in doing that, I think it served me. Because when you hold or contain an extraordinary experience, you allow it to grow in yourself. You allow it to deepen, develop psychological, spiritual connections, which if you suddenly become a media figure talking about your NDE, you may short circuit that kind of deep reflective process that is very valuable.
Keith, if people want to find out more about your book, do they go to a website or Amazon?
They could do both. Amazon, the book is there, Barnes & Noble. The publisher is innertraditions.com. And I have a website of my own, which is www.thompson at large. Thompson, my last name, at large, ATLARGE.com. Thompson at large. So, and the book contains my website in the opening pages. So that's how to find me.
Well, if people want to ask you questions, are you open to that?
I'm open to hearing. My publisher asked me if I wanted to have contact information. So I'm about to find out as this book becomes more well known. I will probably have something on my website. I probably will revise the section when someone wants to send me an email to say, I'll probably be one of those people who's about to say, I read everything I get. I cannot necessarily respond to everybody. and I can't necessarily maybe read your book manuscript. But in any case, I'm open to hearing. I'm a learner. I'm a writer. No, I don't know what my next book will be, but I may find out what that will be because of who I hear as a result of writing this book.
Before we wrap it up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
When my friend Mary Payne, who heard my views, who heard what, who I heard her when I was not in my body anymore, when we had the anomalous experience on the beach, she later developed an illness. She became very sick. She called me and said, "You may have heard I'm not doing well." I said, "Tell me how badly." She goes, "I'm dying." I said, "Well, how's that going?" She said, "Oh, I'm you know me, I'm thorough. I do everything." We had developed a great friendship. So I went to see her. She asked me, I knew she was dying. And so I went to sit and pay my last visit to her. And so we talked a little bit. She goes, "You really heard me on the beach that day?" I said, "Yes." She said, "And you're still not afraid?" And what she meant by that was all fear of death, Jeff, left me that day. I don't know that I went to heaven. I don't know that that realm was, quote, heaven. I do know that the effect of it all was I lost all fear of death. I don't worry about what's after this body. So I said to Mary that day, I said, "Do you remember the times when you were miserable and you continued to trust being? You continued to have trust in being?" She goes, "I do." And her face lit up. And I said, "Keep that up. Keep that up." So I will say to anybody listening, there's no reason not to have trust in the ground of being that brings us here to these kind of topics. There's every reason to believe that we're home and we're safe. That doesn't mean we won't have troubles. We won't have trials. Life won't be difficult. But especially regarding the transition from this life to the next, I'm convinced it is a transition. And in fact, I think my next book is going to be more fully about my death experience. I've only brought it into the UFO book simply because I felt thematically it was appropriate. Now I feel that I'm probably going to go more deeply into depth on death, including my experience with being with my mother and the sense of apparitions and celestial music. I want to help normalize this for people. That's a big part of my goal.
Well, it's good for me because I have a reason to get you back.
Well,
Keith.
it's been a pleasure talking with you about these things. I enjoy your show a lot, and I'm happy to be part of it.
Well, thank you again. I wish you massive success with your book. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.